Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the four patriots who are sitting before us, trying to avoid what Erskine Bowles talked about today and in the Budget Committee testimony as the most predictable economic crisis our country has ever faced. And I appreciate the discussion today. We've talked about a lot of the same issues that this group of 12 has been grappling with, revenues, of course, but also spending. I'd like to focus, if I could, on some of the issues that we've talked about, but maybe with a little different angle. If you wouldn't mind putting up that bipartisan policy center chart again, who's ever in charge of the charts. That's the one that Senator Domenici asked to be put up earlier. And this is the chart that shows that health care spending as a percent of our GDP is set to just about double in the next 25 years. So just take my word for it. Don't need to see it. No. If you guys can put that chart up, I'd appreciate it, because it's the backdrop to this question. Erskine Bowles said current benefits encourage overutilization. He talked about some of the things that could be done, including higher copays, higher premiums, talked about Part A and Part B being combined, having a single deductible. It's a little higher. He also said that in the Simpson-Bowles proposal that you all recommended reducing, there it is, reducing health care spending over a 10-year period by $500 billion. And I assume to Senator Simpson and Mr. Bowles that refers to the GDP plus one. That's what that would mean, $500 billion, given this enormous growth, or to use your words, unsustainable growth in health care expenses. And let me ask you about a couple of ways to get there that we haven't talked about yet. One is means testing. Seems to me this is one where Republicans and Democrats alike ought to be able to come together. I'll give you some interesting statistics. A two-earner couple retiring today will pay about $119,000 in lifetime Medicare taxes and receive about $357,000 in lifetime Medicare benefits. That's $119,000 in taxes for $357,000 in benefits, which goes to the advertisement that you talked about, Al. So that's about $3 in benefits for every dollar in taxes. If you multiply this by the 77 million retiring baby boomers, it's not hard to see why we have an unsustainable program.
Yeah.
Now, we can talk about this in terms of being sure, as Dr. Rivlin just said, that those at the lower end of the income scale are taken care of, but at the same time, I think it's difficult to justify giving upper-income seniors benefits that so far exceed what they paid into the system. Can you all just comment on that? Or we haven't talked about that specifically. How do you feel about means testing, particularly on the Part B and Part D premiums?
Well, you have to follow the nomenclature here. You never want to use the word mean in anything, especially. You call it affluence testing, and then you get juice. And that's what you should do. You're going to have to start affluence testing some of these benefits. There is no possibility of people who, as I say, literally, and you know them in your own community, who use these systems and pay nothing.
How about copays?
Copays have to go up, and you have to affluence test in that.
Do we
These are my
see a show of hands
views.
from the panel, because the photographers love this? How many are for affluence testing?
It'd be like when they asked the Republicans for $9 worth of spending and $1 worth of revenue, and all hands shot up like robots. You don't want to get into that. But
this worked.
I do favor that affluence testing. I always talked about it. Bob Kerry and I talked about it. Max remembers Bob Kerry and I and Danforth and Bradley were all involved in that years ago when we were here. You have to start, and it will be called un-American, cruel, evil, breaking the contract. I can hear the music and the violins in the back already, and it won't work anymore.
Okay, let me go to a tougher one. I don't think we've gotten a
Can I chime in on that? No, we already do have in the Part B premiums.
Yes, we do, and in Part D now.
And Part D.
Yeah.
And we're certainly in favor of increasing that.
Okay. Erskine, you talked a little bit about, again, some other ideas, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, my friend, because one was raising the age. How do you feel about raising the eligibility age, given the statistics on longevity? eligibility age on Medicare I'm talking about.
Yeah, we actually did not have that in our plan. As I have thought about it since that time, under the Affordable Health Care Act, we provide subsidies for people who have, really chronic illnesses and for people who have limited incomes to get so that they can afford health care insurance in the private sector. And that didn't exist before the Affordable Health Care Act. And that means that people 65, 66, 67 would still be able to get health care insurance. So as I think about it, I could support raising the eligibility age for Medicare since we have other coverage available through the Affordable Health Care Act.
Let's go to tax reform for a second, if I could. All of you are talking about broadening the base, and Chairman Baucus, I'm sure Chairman Camp's going to address this too. It's something they're very interested in, simplifying the code, being able to do so by reducing marginal rates and getting rid of some of the underbrush. One thing we haven't talked about is corporate reform. As you all know, we have the second highest corporate tax rate among our trading partners. Japan's slightly higher, and they're intending to take theirs down. The average of all the developed countries, the OECD countries, is 26%. We're at 35%. But in fact, we're not, because you have to add state taxes onto that, and the average is about 6%, which happens to be Ohio's rate. So you're talking about 41%. And we do not have a territorial system. We have a worldwide system, which also puts us at a disadvantage, we're told, by all of our companies. Could I see a show of hands on this? Do you all support getting the corporate rate down to a competitive level? I would define that as 25, 26%. And territoriality. Does everybody agree with that? Oh, Alice. Almost got it.
Alice.
Well, if you're pinning us down to a rate, we did take the rate down to 28 in our
to 27
in ours,
point, so.
Actually we didn't do territoriality, and the reason was interesting. Simpson Bowles had strong representation from big multinational corporation on it. They spoke very eloquently for territoriality. Our business representation was more small business. They were not enthusiastic about territoriality, so we left it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. We took the corporate rate to 26%, and we went to a territorial system and paid for it.
Pete?
I support ours, the one that we've been describing. We didn't come down as far as them, but the 28's ours.
Yeah.
But I think the problem we've got with the public on that is it's discussed in isolation by the commentators. They just say we're lowering taxes on the fat cats, the corporations. But when it's part of an overall plan, they got a big reduction.
Yeah, and I'm talking about not lowering the tax. It would be revenue neutral. So there would be no reduction in the taxation. In fact, you'd get growth from that based on all the economic analysis that we've seen, which would add more revenue that was not revenue from increasing taxes, but revenue from growth. And other feedback effects.
I don't disagree. I was just giving you an explanation that I've heard.
Yeah, I appreciate it. With regard to balance, because that has come up here, the co-chair talked about balance. You all have talked about ratios and balances. What is the right balance? I think, Erskine, you talked about this earlier in terms of where you all were headed and where you ended up. Could you or Senator Simpson give us a sense of what you believe is the right balance here between revenue that is generated, again, through tax reform, but new revenue, and on the one hand, on the other hand, reductions in spending? What's the right balance?
Yeah, we thought it was no less than two-thirds, and we worked towards three-quarters coming from spending as opposed to one-quarter or one-third coming from revenue. If you look at the projections for 2020, it had spending, I think, at about 25% and revenue at 19%. And we didn't want to see revenue go above 21%, and obviously we wanted to see if we could drive spending down to where revenue was so we could balance the budget at some point in time.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because you're right. We're now at about historical average of about 18.4% on revenue, and we're lower now with the recession, but even under CBO's statistics showing that the tax cuts would all continue, we get back up to that 18% in the next several years. One final well, let's see, my time has expired. Listen, again, I want to thank you all for your help today and the help you've given us up to this point. All of you have made contributions to our efforts, and both individually and as part of your groups, and we're going to need your help going forward. Thank you.
Time of the gentleman.